My name is Hannah, and this is my no-buy year. At the end of every month, I film a video updating you on the progress of my no-buy year, what's going on, how I'm feeling about it, etc., etc. This is my February check-in. At the end of January, everything, as you may remember, was sunshine and roses. I was still kind of high on the beginning of my no-buy year. I was excited that I had made it through a month, and all of the incredible benefits of being on a no-buy were starting to present themselves to me. I felt amazing. I still feel amazing. But for the February check-in, I'm going to present some struggles, because there are some joys, because there are some, and then some observations and thoughts that I've jotted down throughout the month, things that the no-buy year is bringing up that I think are interesting. In my January check-in, I did a library haul. I can't really do a library haul every time because I've been going to the library pretty much on a weekly basis, returning the books I've read, checking out new books, so there's not a way to fit it in because there are books that I've checked out, read, and returned since my January check-in. But I will talk about the books that I read this month and do a very brief rundown. I'll save it for the end, just in case you're only here for the makeup or only here for the anti-consumerism. Those of you who are also here for the books can stick it out. So let's start with the struggles. The first struggle is that I've been going through my products at a rapid rate of speed, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and this mostly has to do with skincare. I haven't really used up very many makeup products, if any. Many of my top tier skincare products, my holy grails, the ones that I really depend on to keep my skin in tip-top shape, I've used up and haven't been able to repurchase yet because there are other products in that same category. So for example, I used up my Sunday Riley Good Genes, but I'm still working on my lactic acid serum from The Ordinary. I used up my Wild Rose Sleeping Facial from Korres, but I still have a number of sleeping masks and sleeping moisturizers that I have to use up before I'll be able to repurchase that. And I have seen an effect on my skin. It's not terrible, not breaking out all over the place, it's not peeling off or anything. It's just not as toned, as plump, as even as it used to be. So it's interesting because I'm learning that my Holy Grail products are truly effective. It's a little crummy to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and just think, ugh, I know what I need to wake up and feel like my skin is at its best, and I'm not allowing myself to buy those things right now. But it's not the end of the world. There are a lot of worse things that could happen in a person's life. So that's kind of the positive side of this struggle. I tend to think like, I have to have the best product. I have to have the best skin at any cost. I'll do anything, I'll buy it. So what happens if you run out of the best product and you don't repurchase it? What happens if you use up your top tier skincare products and you move to the sort of okay products that are kicking around and you just spend a month or two using those up? It's fine. Like, my skin's not at its best, but it's not ruining my life. I'm learning, I'm getting through it, and I still look fine. You know, I just know that I can feel a little bit better, I can do a little bit better, but it's not worth breaking my no-buy to immediately replace those products. I'm gonna be okay. Now, the second, and I think possibly less expected and more interesting, kind of more psychological struggle has had to do with impulse control. Basically, my other vices have reared their heads more aggressively in the month of February. I'm used to treating myself, rewarding myself, and being excited about new products, purchases. And my brain is used to the dopamine rush from buying things. It's not just psychological, it's chemical. And I spent years and years of my life constantly triggering those chemicals those pleasure chemicals, pleasure centers in the brain by clicking that checkout cart, purchase, by going to the shops, taking things, putting them in my basket, buying. And suddenly I cut myself off from that. In January, it was like, this is so fun. And then in February, I think my brain really started to rebel against the lack of that stimulation. I guess what could be called a kind of withdrawal. I know it's not the same as withdrawal from addiction, like drug addiction or alcohol addiction. I do consider myself to have had a problem with shopping. It was more just a problem. It was something I needed to address. But, you know, I'm going through the commensurate withdrawal. It's chemical and it's psychological, and it has to do with reward. My brain wants a treat. My brain wants to be rewarded. When I have a tough day, my brain pitches a fit. I'm not allowed to have this kind of treat anymore. I'm not allowed to buy stuff as a treat. So the other kinds of treats have become way more attractive and ever present in my life. And the other kinds of treats in my life are food and pampering, like going to the spa, that kind of thing. And in fact, I haven't really had time to go to the spa. I went once this month. I went to the Korean spa. It was amazing. But the other kind of treat, the food treat, the drinks treat, that's been tough. And I have a very clean diet. I mostly eat paleo, and I don't drink very often at home. At least this is how it has been. I try not to eat very much sugar because it really, really messes me up. I try not to drink coffee because it gives me a weird body odor. So I have all these things that I like, that I indulge in from time to time, like wine and chocolate and coffee, that I usually do a pretty good job of holding myself back from. And what I found as I got into the end of January, beginning of February, is that I was like eating half a chocolate bar a day. I was having a little glass of wine every night when I cooked dinner. The part of my brain that is able to hold me back from doing things that I want to do but that I know are unhealthy for me, it was like shot to pieces by the end of January. And as February revved up, I was really feeling the effects of it. If I drink wine every night, I turn into like a bitchy, crabby mess by the end of the week. Like once or twice a week is okay, but every night it catches up with me at this point. Same thing with sugar. Same thing with coffee. By midway through February, I was not my best self. The toddler in my brain was like, well, if you can't buy makeup and you can't buy clothes, then you're gonna have chocolate and wine and coffee and all the things. And I just couldn't say no to the toddler. If you know the Whole30 program, which I've been through a couple of times, the Whole30 people call it the sugar dragon. I'm familiar with it. I have quelled my sugar dragon and had it reawaken a number of times over the past couple years through my journey with clean eating. And so I knew what I needed to do. Partway through the month, I started a reset for my food consumption. No grains, no sugar, no alcohol, no treats. I set aside 2 solid weeks to reset my habits, my food habits. And it was kind of intense because I'm already doing this No Buy Year, which is a year-long reset of my shopping habits. And then to impose a reset of my food habits on top of that, it was a lot. And especially the first couple of days, I was really grumpy, and I felt like there was no injustice greater in the world than the fact that I couldn't eat chocolate or buy a new houseplant. Like, I was like, how can I live? But as all of the sugar got flushed out of my system and I started to feel healthy and energized again, I kind of balanced out, it came back to normal, started to feel really good, and I'm nearing the end of those 2 weeks right now, and I'm fine. I'm doing great, actually. I'm just gonna kind of keep an eye on myself, keep an eye out. I'm not gonna be eating no treats ever. I'm not gonna be having no wine ever. like I have been doing for these past 2 weeks. I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to be super perfect and that we should have really, really strict rules for everything and that we should be perfectionists all the time and never do the things that are unhealthy. That's not the way that I want to live, and that's not what I recommend to you. You know, it's just something to think about. If you're thinking about doing a no buy, pay attention to the other areas of your life in which impulse control is a struggle. I have found that in the same way that exploring my mentality and my habits about shopping with my no buy year is increasing my self-awareness and therefore increasing my health, my mental health. Exploring my habits and my impulses around food and learning which foods are really good for me and which foods aren't has increased my well-being. It's kind of connected to the no buy year because it has to do with changing habits and getting to know yourself better. So I'd be more than willing to do a whole video about that if you want. If you're interested, please leave a comment about that. So those are my 2 main struggles that I noticed. Let's move on to the joys. Joy number 1, y'all, I am saving so much money and I don't know quite how to keep track of it. I don't know how I can count up what I would have spent, but I don't care that much about keeping track of the exact numbers. I can feel the difference. When I go to the grocery store and I pay for food, I swipe my card and I'm not worried about my bank balance. I know it's not a lot, I know it's not a really high number, but I also know that I'm not running the risk of draining my bank account by buying groceries. Cash seems to be multiplying in my wallet. I like acquire cash here and there, like splitting meals with people or making change for customers, stuff like that. And I put it in my wallet, and then the next time I look in there, it seems like the 20s have had babies with each other and suddenly there's a 50 in there or there's a $100 bill in there. I mean, that's not really what's happening, but it feels like that's what's happening because I'm used to every time I look in my wallet for cash, there's less than there was before, or oh, I thought I had a 50, but oh, I forgot I spent it at Sephora. You know, there was a time during February when I had to actually take some cash out of my wallet and like stash it at home, which is the opposite of what I've been doing over the course of last year. I've been like taking cash from where I stashed it, putting it in my wallet, and then spending it. And honestly, I almost cried on the day that I did that. I'm not good with money, and I also don't like talking about it. I don't know if you can tell. It makes me feel awkward. It makes me feel ashamed because I love beautiful things so much that my history is one of just spending money in an incredibly unwise way on beautiful things that I long for to try to improve my quality of life. And my goal with this year was to discover that not spending money on those things and saving it would be a thing that would actually improve my quality of life. And it's already true, and it's profound to me. Like, I feel like I'm healing a wound in a way, and I know that might sound dramatic because not everybody has these kinds of fraught and scary feelings about money, but I do. I have issues, and the feeling of taking some modicum of control back over my finances, even if it's just like I put $50 in my wallet last week and I checked it again this week and it's still there, like that's a big deal to me. That is a serious source of joy. I've also noticed a decrease in my overall shopping behavior. And what I mean by shopping behavior are shopping type things that don't involve actually making a purchase. Putting things in my cart, editing my cart, thinking about what I like, checking out what's new on aritzia.com, checking out what's new in Sephora. I did a lot more of that in January than I've been doing in February. I think I said this before, but fake shopping is a lot less engaging than real shopping. And in January, I continued to spend some time shopping online, even though I wasn't buying anything, because it was my habit. And in February, that behavior has really sharply declined. I think about clicking over to Sephora and then I'm like, why? I already know what's new from watching all the beauty gurus talk about it. I don't need to go look at the listing. I don't need to browse. And there are other things I'd rather be doing. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've kind of idly thought about clicking over to Sephora, and then instead I just pick up my book and start reading. So there's definitely been a decline in my overall shopping retail behavior, as my dad calls it. My shopping behavior has fallen off, and that is a joy. Moving on to interesting observations. Not that the struggles and the joys haven't been interesting. It's all interesting to me. I'm fascinated by myself. I'm fascinated by myself. No, I'm fascinated by this process, and I find it all interesting. But these are a couple of things that didn't really fit into the categories of struggles or joys. So the first one is my birthday. My birthday is coming up. It is just around the corner. I'm filming this on Saturday, and my birthday is on Tuesday. And I will probably receive some gifts. I knew my birthday was coming, and I sort of saw it. From January 1st, my no-buy year began, and I like looked out into the distance and I was like, February 27th, you're there. You're like a life raft in the future. I'm swimming towards you. I'll get to you eventually. I knew that if there was something that I learned that I could not live without, that I didn't have, that I could ask for it for my birthday at the end of February. Interesting item number one about my birthday. I fully expected that by the time the end of February rolled around, there would be things that I needed and couldn't buy. I was expecting that partway through January or partway through February, there would be something, a skincare product, an item of clothing, a homeware, that I was like, oh gosh, I'm screwed because I didn't buy this. I really need it, but I don't want to break my no-buy year. And that those would be the things that I was asking for my birthday. I don't need anything. I have enough. And everything that I've sort of been like, oh, I wish I had that. Like, I found out the other day that I don't have a pale lavender eyeshadow. Eyeshadow is not a good example. I was expecting there would be things like socks, you know, like utilitarian things that I had forgotten that I was going to need. There's been nothing. When my family started asking, what do you want for your birthday? And my boyfriend, you know, I was like, wow, I don't need anything. There are things that I want. There are things that I like. There are things that would make my life easier. But my perspective about what's a need and what's just a want has changed, I think. I think maybe 2 months ago I might have said, no, I really need a teapot. I really need one. Or I really need the frames for those pictures that I forgot to frame. I really need them. Those pictures can't go without frames for another, you know, year. I just don't feel that way anymore. 2 months in, I don't feel like I need those things. The other thing about my birthday and the lead up to it and the fact that it's about to pass is this. I have been making avid use of an online wish list program called Wishlister. And my family and I have been using it for a couple of years now, actually. My sister has a wish lister, my dad has one. So I have this wish lister. I know that my family has access to it. I know that my boyfriend has access to it. And I've been using it like a mad woman this year. When I come across something and I have that feeling like, oh, I've got to have that. I really need that. I really want that. Instead of buying it, I put it on my wish lister. And it's been like, I can get it for my birthday. Every time I'm like, oh, the new Colourpop Super Shock eyeshadows, those beautiful colors. I really want that one. I'll get it for my birthday. Or I'm like, oh, this beautiful leggings from Carbon 38. I'll get them for my birthday. Sweater that I really want. I saw it on a friend. I looked it up. I found it. They still have it on my size. I'll get it for my birthday. Everything I've wanted, even remotely, for the past 2 months, I've been like, oh yeah, I'll get it for my birthday. That's fine. Yeah, everyone, my family will get it for me for my birthday. But we're not like, you know, exorbitant gift givers. Like, what's gonna happen on my birthday is that my sister will get me like one modest gift, and my parents will probably go in together on one modest gift. And then my boyfriend will get me something. But he is like morally opposed to using the wish lister. He always wants to go off list. So he'll probably get me something of his own devising that's not even on the list. So there's like 2, at best maybe 3 things from the wish list that I have no way of knowing or choosing what they'll be, that my family might generously give me for my birthday. So this fantasy of like, oh, all this stuff that I really, really want but can't buy, I'll get it for my birthday, I'll get it for my birthday. It's absolutely bananas. It's nuts. I've been living in this like nutso fantasy world wherein everything that I remotely desire I'll be able to receive for my birthday, and then I won't be sad that I couldn't buy it during my no-buy year. As my birthday has approached, I went onto my wish lister to edit it down because I knew I had just been like throwing shit on there every 10 seconds and that there was probably a bunch of stuff on there that wasn't really my priority. I didn't want my family to go on there and be like, oh, look, what Hannah really wants is a pair of kitchen shears that are designed specifically for cooking herbs, and like, click, get that. And that, like, you know, I wanted to like weed out a number of things that I had just put on there in a moment of grief about not being able to purchase them for myself. So I went on there and I started weeding. I'm telling you, the vast majority of things on there, I couldn't even remember why I wanted them. Like I felt like I put them on there just to make myself feel better, which is true, but I was just like, erase, 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 erase. And I know that with each one of those things, there had been a frenzy of desire at that moment, like a frenzy of desperate need to make sure that I would get it for my birthday at the moment that I had added it to my wish list. And so many of the things that were on there just seemed incredibly lackluster and unimportant to me when I went back through last week. It blew my mind. It was a really interesting process. So this brings me to kind of my last little interesting observation, which is how quickly the desire for a thing passes, how quickly the desperate need transforms. And I think that if we are buying the things that we feel that desperate need for, what happens is we acquire the thing and then the desire sort of transforms. But I'm here to tell you that in almost every case, that excitement dies and changes whether you buy the thing or not. I suspected that this might be true. I kind of talked about it at the beginning of my no-buy year, and it's really proven to be true. When I want a thing, like this sweater, for example, I saw this beautiful off-the-shoulder sweater on my friend at a tango festival. It was like a deep chartreuse color that I love, right? I wanted that sweater so bad. And when I want a thing like that, it's like a pain. It's like an ache. I saw it and I envisioned myself owning it, and I envisioned like a fantasy version of myself, a new and improved Hannah. I imagined wearing it and coming on camera wearing it, and just how perfect it would be and how perfected I would be because of having it and wearing it and owning it. So I was engaging in that vision, that fantasy, fantasizing about the fantasy self. I wanted to rise to the level of that fantasy self so badly that my need for that sweater, but not just for the sweater, my need to become my fantasy self is like a pain, right? And it's related to the item, because when you convince yourself that the item is the vehicle by which you will become your fantasy self, then the fixation on the item and the fixation on being the fantasy version of yourself become one thing. The fantasy self is always going to be there, and the question of whether we should even aspire to be our fantasy selves is possibly a topic for another day. I don't think that's even very healthy, right? We are who we are. We're imperfect. And even if we're able to continue buying beautiful new sweaters all the time, they aren't actually the vehicles to achieving the fantasy self. If you really want to change, if you really want to become an evolved version of yourself, buying a sweater is not the way. It's by searching within that we evolve in that way. So the whole premise is false to begin with. The whole connection, the whole infrastructure of this desire is false to begin with. But that aside, even pushing that aside, just a week later, I was like, I like that sweater. Sure, I'd enjoy having that sweater, but that that pain is gone. The pain is gone whether you buy the sweater or not. The crazy belief that owning that thing would bring magic into my life, it calms down. You give it a week or so and it calms down. And I knew this, like we all know this. It's not like I've never gone through this process before. It's just become much, much more obvious under these extreme circumstances of choosing not to buy anything for a year. So that's it for my struggles, my joys, and my interesting observations at the end of February of my no-buy year 2018. If you would like to hear about the books that I read in February and what I thought of them, stick around. If not, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and please tune in for my next video. I post new videos every Sunday and every Wednesday.
Let's get into the books. Let's get into the books.
I don't have them all here. I've returned a lot of them to the library. The ones that I do have here, I will talk about. So I read the first 5 books in the Inspector Lynley series by Elizabeth George. This is the 5th one. This one's called For the Sake of Elena. And they are so great. And there are more in the series. I think it goes on for like 10 or 11 books. And I actually had to force myself to stop making my way through the series and start reading some other books because I kind of want to save it. I kind of want to spread it out. They're murder mysteries. The plot's fantastic. The characters are fantastic. And I was kind of guessing every time. I wasn't able ever to guess what happened. I mean, the plot-wise, they're beautifully written, but I feel like that kind of goes without saying. Like, I wouldn't want to read them if they weren't. The thing that I find a little bit more interesting is what aspects of the human condition is she dealing with underlying the plot and sort of woven through the plot of the murder mysteries. Because good mystery writers, that's always what they're doing, right? They're providing this candy, which is the murder and the solving of the murder. That's super fun. But then they're commenting on the human condition with their characters. That is what provides kind of grit and intrigue, and that's what kind of keeps me going back. There are a lot of characters in this novel who are restricted in their behavior as adult people by the gender performance that they were raised to inhabit. So it's like women who feel like they have to do a certain thing and have to behave a certain way because they're women and it's ruining their lives. And men who feel like they have to behave a certain way and they have to do a certain thing because they're men and it's ruining their lives and it's ruining the lives of their wives and daughters. You know, the way in which our assumptions about gender and our assumptions about our own gender can hamstring us. And I am really into that stuff, and she does an incredibly sort of subtle and accurate job of exploring the facets of those questions in this book. So when I decided to move on from that, I went and read The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ by Philip Pullman. This is, as I expected, a subversive retelling of the gospel with Jesus as 2 characters. Jesus' twins. It's like twins are born and one is named Jesus and one is named Christ. And one character lives the life that we have come to recognize as the story of Jesus, and the other records it, like writes it down and perfects and sort of shines up the story as he's writing it down. If a subversive retelling of the gospel sounds interesting to you, then you should definitely give this a read, because in that way it's interesting. But it's not really about Jesus. It's not really about Christianity. It's about storytelling, and mythology. It's about how a mythology is created and the difference between what life is actually like, lived life, and the stories that we tell ourselves about what happened in our life. So it kind of goes back to that thing of the fantasy self. It's basically saying there was a man and then there was the fantasy, the mythology of the man, and those 2 things are different. Whether it's Jesus or not, in this case it's Jesus, but I think he's kind of implying that in anyone's case, anyone's life, anyone's story, there's the story about the thing, and then there's the thing itself. So I moved on to another Philip Pullman book. I didn't realize this had come out at the end of January. Philip Pullman's writing a new trilogy called The Book of Dust. This is the first one, and it's called La Belle Sauvage. And if you have read The Golden Compass, this trilogy fits also into that world. So La Belle Sauvage comes before The Golden Compass, and then I think the second in the trilogy is going to come after The Amber Spyglass, so it'll be like after the entire trilogy. So it's 3 more books, but they're fitting in around the Golden Compass trilogy in a funny way. This was an absolute pleasure to read, and I highly recommend it whether you've read The Golden Compass or not. The themes of this book have to do with fighting for freedom of speech and survival and rebellion under a fascist regime, and I really enjoyed it extra for that reason. And then it kind of unexpectedly becomes a real fantasy epic partway through. So it had both of those things, both of those elements, and I thought that was pretty brilliant. I enjoyed it a lot. Highly recommend. This is probably my top recommendation from the month. So now I'm working on Terrier by Tamora Pierce. I'm halfway through. I talked about this in my library haul. It's super fun to read. It's medieval fantasy, so in some ways it's kind of like historical fiction because there are a lot of elements of actual medieval history in it. The language that they use is like half made up and half historical medieval, and the weapons that they have and the way that they fight and the class system and the way the cities are organized, all of it is, it's like if you like historical fiction, it gives a dose of that, but then there's also magic and other stuff that I assume wasn't really around in medieval times. Both the Book of Dust and the Tamora Pierce series are young adult novels. This is classified as young adult, but it reads like literature, just that the characters are children, most of them. Whereas the Tamora Pierce book, it reads a little bit more like young adult fiction, but that's fine with me. I'm enjoying tearing through it. That does it for this February check-in. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. If you aren't subscribed, I hope that you will subscribe to my channel. If you are subscribed but you haven't clicked that notification bell, please click it so that you can be notified every time I post something new. I really appreciate you spending this time with me. Leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, remember to take extra good care of yourself this week so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.